I spent days creating these scrapbook layouts so you don't have to overthink a single step. And I turned it into something that makes crafting so much easier. I have 3 double-page layouts to share with you, so 6 pages in total, all using the Beautiful Ordinary Life, which is a new collection from Stampin' Up. We got gorgeous colors, we have fun patterns. It's a wonderful collection for everyday life. And the back sides are all black and white patterns. So if you need a break from all the color, just flip over to the back sides and you get some nice black and white patterns. I have added lots of detail in this workshop. We have fun borders, ripping details, some stamping, die cuts. I'm going to be doing some clustering and some layers. I know that can be a little tricky sometimes if you're not too sure about how to layer things up. So following along can be a great way to figure out how to put all the pieces together to build a cluster. I'll give you a close-up look of this one as well. More texture, more layers. And you could easily swap out the pieces if you didn't want to have florals on your pages. Maybe you want to have some stars or some balloons and do birthday layouts. The patterns on here are so generic, you could use them for many different things. You could put travel photos on here, just switch out your titles, or even like the title on this page, Love This Life, that could definitely work for some vacation photos. There's opportunities for portrait photos. I have some square photos on this one. I always like mixing in a variety of photo sizes. One of the sets that I'm using is called Bordered in Beauty. This is a new one coming out on May 5th, along with this paper collection. And it has stamps and dies, and they go together. So what that looks like, I've already mounted mine onto a magnet, and you can see all of these beautiful borders. Some are longer, some are shorter. This is the file tab that you see here, but they coordinate with the stamps that are in the stamp set so that you could stamp a border and then use the coordinating die to cut that out if you want to. Now, I did end up using them independently. You can see this little heart border here, and I stamped that one right on my background. So you can use them with the dies or you can use them separately. And then I have die cut a lot of my borders. This one here, I am using this larger scallop die right there. And of course I have some ripping in here. And this one is actually one of my favorites. It is this sort of like bracket die. And you can see how it has a piercing detail. Now you do need to pay attention on which side you put the piercing detail. I kept messing this up and I would put it on the wrong side and then you don't get that piercing. So here you could see right there on this piece of paper, you can see all those little dots. I love that extra detail on dies, and if a die has it, I definitely want to take advantage of it. So when you are cutting your die, you got to make sure that the piercing detail is actually facing the rest of your paper. If it's on the outside of the cut line, you're going to cut it right off. You're going to lose that detail, and I did do that a few times. So when I go to put this die on my paper, I'm going to flip it over and I can see that the piercing is above where the cut line is. If I do it like this, the piece that's getting those little piercing dots is on the top, and that's going to be the garbage part. So I need to flip it around so that when I flip this over, the piercing is on the bottom facing me. And then when I put this on, I like to use washi tape, especially with long dies like this. If you're using the whole length of this die, I would put a piece of washi at one end and at the other end to make sure it's not shifting in your die cut machine because you want your line to be straight. So I'm just going to die cut this real quick. And then when I come back and take that off, you can see how that piercing detail is on my piece of paper that I'm going to use on my layout. It's not a big deal if it doesn't work out. I have a few on mine where I'm missing that piercing detail, but if the die has it, I like to use it. Another tip to help you is when it comes to working with these border stamps. Now, sometimes they can be a little wobbly and tricky to get a straight line. And so what I found works really good is to bring in like some sort of grid mat, some sort of straight line, even a ruler, if that works better for you. Line up your stamp with one of the lines and then lay your block on top, because then the stamp isn't accidentally skewed. It's laying relaxed in a straight line. Then you just pick it up with your block and you are ready to stamp. Now the little faded hearts technique that I used on this page, I'm going to bring in my Flirty Flamingo ink and just show you how I did this. Some inks you're not going to get as many rows of hearts as I did. You can see here I have about 4 rows before the ink is so light that you just can't see it anymore. And some inks, especially darker ones, you'll get more stamping out of them. Because I'm not re-inking, I want my darkest one to be at the top. So I'm going to stamp that. And then I'm going to offset them. Just go over about one space, one little heart space. And then I'm going to shift back to the left again and stamp again. And then I'm going to shift back to the right and stamp again. So there you go. You can see how we're really fading off here almost to nothing. And I love doing that because it's almost like you're blending ink. You have your dark and then it just fades off into nothing. So that is a fun way to use the borders. Now, one of the other stamping techniques that I did on this page is bridging the gap between my 2 pages to fill in a little bit of blank area there in the middle. It's definitely not a necessary step, but I love the detail. You could see that kind of cascade of butterflies. It starts down here with this one, and then they kind of go back and forth through that gap between my 2 pages and then end up here on the top on the left page. So we start on the left page, we kind of wrap around and spill out onto the right page, and then end up back on the left page. And that's exactly how I stamped it. I stamped it in a cascade like that. And so to do that, I'm just going to use my scrap pieces here to show you. And what you want to do is put your 2 12 by 12 pieces, butt them up right next to each other, make sure they're lined up. I used Lost Lagoon ink and a piece of scrap paper because I am going to stamp off. And then the butterfly is from one of the other sets I used in this workshop. There are so many fun images in here. I really got my use out of this set. I used it a ton, as well as the coordinating dies. So it has some really fun dies in here that came in very handy for all my clustering and layering title options in here as well. And when I'm doing the butterflies, I am inking them up, stamp off, and then start stamping. We can get about 2 stamps out of this. We have a darker one, a lighter one, and then we need to re-ink. You could always washi tape your pages together if you're worried about them separating. Oh, I forgot to stamp off there. Stamp off. And you basically just cascade them up your page, changing the angle of your stamping. Just remember to stamp off. I wasn't thinking about that as I was doing it, but otherwise you will end up with a little bit more focal point, which is fine if you want that to be a focal point. My goal for this was just a nice little background detail that adds to the overall beauty of the page, but doesn't steal the show. Another important thing to remember when you are doing pages that have lots of layers, lots of clusters, is where you're putting your adhesive. Because if you have little strips, like this piece does not go all the way underneath. This is 2 strips because I don't want to waste paper. I wanted to get the most out of my paper that I could, and so it's better to do 2 smaller strips. Plus, it's easier to die cut. If you are die cutting little edges into things, it's much easier to do that on little strips rather than big chunks of paper. In fact, that's one of the reasons I ripped this polka dot piece. I like the variation to rip the paper. It also made it easier because this is one big chunk of paper, and it would have been pretty much impossible. It was too big to go through my machine. And so by ripping the edge, I was able to add some detail without having to die cut it. But as you're going and sticking all these little pieces under, you want to make sure that you are keeping your adhesive away from the edge. Now, the nice thing is, because this is all planned out for you, you could see exactly which pieces are getting tucked. So I know that I can stick down, you know, my corners over here, but I need to leave room here and a little bit over here and a little bit over here so that I could put layers under. That's one of the benefits of using a workshop guide, you could see where everything needs to go before you get started. You're not like me trying to pry layers up and tuck things under. It also helps if you put on your tape runner and don't fully press things down. Like just kind of set them where you want them to go. And then once everything is on, you can give it a really good press and seal it into place. Now let's go ahead and have a look at the next layout. So this one has a lot of texture going on. We have lots of strips and the clusters are a little bit smaller compared to the last one. We have lots of ripping here, and I go into detail in the guide about reminding you to put the light pink at the top, the dark pink at the bottom, and to lay out your pieces before you start ripping so that you know which side to rip on each piece. I did go ahead and rip before I did my inking. You may have noticed on the first layout how I had black around all my edges. I just like that look for something like this where there's lots of pattern, lots of color. I think it helps the layers really stand out. So I use my mini ink blending tool and black ink, doesn't really matter what black ink, just any black ink, and go right around the edges. You could take the ink pad directly to it as well. So that would look something like this, just taking your ink pad, running it right along the edge. Sometimes I find that's better because you don't get as much black ink coming in, but sometimes it can be tricky to handle. And so this one is my go-to. You could use a finger dauber as well. But let's have a little close up here on these cute clusters. So we have some new die cut shapes. I'll show you that set in a second. We have more of those die cut borders. We have some background stamping here, doing a similar thing as the butterflies where I'm stamping with the full ink and then fading it off into the background. Up here as well, there is stamping all around this cluster, stamping on some of the pattern paper. And I tried to keep the clusters small and not too overwhelming. They're meant to add to the page, but not overtake it. Here's that beautiful stamped title. And then the butterflies on here are stamped on pattern paper. So I didn't have to do any coloring. They're stamped right on the pattern paper and then using the coordinating die. Got a little bit of layering going on here. We have this stamped label in the background and then our little file tab and this piece over here, this little frame, and then again, more stamping around there. I love the texture of the ripping. It's so much fun. And remember, if you want to see the white core of paper when you're ripping, it doesn't really matter on this layout because I'm inking all the edges anyway, so you're not really getting the benefit of the white core. But if you're working with darker colors and you want to see that white core, you want to make sure you rip towards yourself like this, right? And then you're seeing that exposed. If you rip the other way, where I'm ripping away from myself, I am getting, you can see just the ripped edge, but really no white showing compared to this side. Now for these pieces, I did kind of give it a little bit of shape on some of these where it comes out farther, goes in a little bit. You can play with that to how you like it. I ripped the colored ones first, the pink ones, and then the black and white print, I put it beside it and just ripped it kind of along the same direction. I wanted it to sort of mirror the same pattern as I did on the pink patterns, and I think that worked out really well. Now I do go through all the details in the guide, and there are cutting diagrams so you can see exactly how to cut your paper. There are full color photos, there are written directions, measurements of how far away to put things. This one's a little bit of a thick guide because I really wanted to include all the detail for you to help you put these together without having to think about it. Just do the easy part, the fun part, have fun stamping and ripping your paper and putting on your photos. Now when it comes to photos, I did use photo placeholders so you could see what size photos go where when I photographed the pages. So these white mats are not in the cutting directions. If you want a white layer, maybe you want a double mat. You want the yellow and you want a layer of white before your actual photo, then you will need to add those white ones on your own, or photo placeholders if you have some extra in your stash. Photo placeholders come in the Stampin' Up workshop kits, and I have some from close to my heart. I collected them for many years. And so I have a pretty good stash of them, and I like to use those on my workshops when I'm not adding photos, so you can see what size photos go where. This piece here, I cut in half. This was one whole piece, and I cut it in half and show a picture of that in the guide so you could see exactly where to cut it. And then this one here is a separate piece that I added after the fact. It's just glued behind here because I thought it looked funny with just one sprig. It needed 2 sprigs. Now, if you're wondering where this title piece came from or these beautiful little frames, this is from Scalloped Wishes. So if you have this set, I also used this little branch right here because I ran out of greenery. I needed a little something extra to fill out this cluster. It was looking a little sad with just 2 flowers and an ampersand. So I needed that to kind of extend and make it feel a part of that part of the page. But you could definitely substitute this for something in your stash that would be big enough to fit your title, and also add a layer under these clusters. Now, if you're wanting to get your hand on this guide for free, you can place an $80 order on my Stampin' Up website. The link is down below anytime during the month of May, and I will email you the guide for free. Also, if you join my Crafty Hearts team, you get all my guides, and my friend Julie Carrier, you get all of her guides for free every month, as well as the past guides that we have done. And for my international friends who are not in Canada, you can purchase the guide at the link down in my description box and get it that way. So here are the details for layout number 3. We have pattern paper as a background. I don't do that very often, but I thought it would be fun on this one. This is like a little, it looks like hearts to me, but it could also just be like, well, it could be like seagulls. It could be just like a little triangle kind of pattern. It can be whatever you want it to be, basically. And I have done more of that backing of the paperboard pieces. You see I have some hexagons layered here in the back. I love this little notebook journaling piece from that Extraordinary Life die set, and I layered a little black piece as well just to build out that cluster a little bit more. On this one, I did ripping on all my pieces because my thinking was, by the time you get to the 3rd layout, you probably want it to be quicker. So I was like, okay, let's speed this up for you so that, you know, you've gotten to play with the dies, you've gotten to do a bunch of stamping on the 3rd layout. Let's simplify and do ripping on our edges. You can fit a lot of photos on this layout. You could see here, we have room for 10 photos, but if you have 12, you could leave these 2 off and just have a straight grid of photos across the 2 pages. You could also, if you have landscape photos, swap out 2 photo spots and put 1 6x4. So the guide really does do the heavy lifting for you, but if there's things you want to tweak and change up, it's definitely easy to do. This paper here is actually the back side of this pool party polka dot pattern. So I have gutted it out in the middle to save that paper. I couldn't bear to like use both sheets just as a background. I had to get some of that polka dot paper onto my pages. Over here, I have a fun little banner detail. These are not glued where the photos go. If you're not putting your photos on while you're scrapbooking, you want to make sure any elements that are overlaying your photo mats are not stuck all the way down. These just have a little bead of glue along the top. Same with this little frame over here. That is not stuck down either. I can easily slip my photos in there. You can see I've layered again with this ampersand and labels and hexagons. I just love all the clustering we get to do in this workshop because there were so many fun pieces to work with. And as soon as I saw this collection, that's what it made me think of. It's like fun clusters, everyday life. And I had a lot of fun putting this together, so I hope you do too. You might notice that this is the only page where there's some red pops of color. And that's because this part of the paper that I used had red pops, and really that didn't make its way into any of the other 2 layouts. So I did try to incorporate that more into my page. So I stamped this outline here, the 1 through 5 in red. I did my title in red. And then for this piece, this little label piece and this hexagon over here, I wanted to have touches of that red. You always want to balance out the colors. That's why in my clusters you're seeing repetition. I'm repeating the same patterns, the same colors in each cluster so that it looks balanced and it looks cohesive. That is something I think you can learn as you go over time, what looks good when you spread that same pattern or that same color around. It really unifies everything. But those are things I think about when I'm designing to make sure that you don't have to think about it. So when it came to that red, I knew I wanted to bring in other touches of red to my page. So for this paper, I actually took some of the black and white polka dot paper and I ink blended on it. So the polka dots are the back side of this pattern here, but you can see all these pieces have fun black and white patterns on the back. So you could do this on any of the different patterns. I particularly love this one with the leaves. You could color that in with pencils or markers. I left mine plain because it went with how I was doing my layout with the different colors I was using, but it is super easy to add color to these. So I'm just grabbing out my real red ink. I'm gonna move this out of the way so I don't get ink on myself or on my layout. And then bring in whatever black and white pattern you want to use. And I'm just gonna start off very lightly. And what I found was the best to get a nice variation. Hopefully you can see that. I have like some areas are darker, some areas are lighter. I actually ink blended a whole little chunk of paper so that I could die cut the banners, the ampersand, my little label down here, and my hexagon. I wanted to make sure I had a big enough piece to ink blend all of those. And just start off lightly, and then you can go back in with a little bit heavier hand and layer it up and get it as dark as you want it. But I think it's fun to have some areas darker, some areas lighter, and it looks good on the final die cut. For my little label on this side, what I did was take this die from the Bordered in Beauty and this die. This one's fun because it cuts out of a solid piece. It doesn't cut out individual, like an individual line. It just cuts it into whatever you're cutting. So I'm gonna show you what that looks like because I don't think my explanation made very much sense. I'm just gonna grab my scissors and do like a little rough cut. And I'm going to washi tape that in place so that it's not moving around on me. I could die cut this at the same time, but I'm gonna do this in 2 steps. So that gave me a nice little label here. And then I could take my arrows, put it not right at the edge because I don't want this cutting over the edge of my die. So I'm just gonna place that like that, make sure it's somewhat straight. And here is what that looks like. Isn't that fun? I think it'd be really fun to use that die out of like a journaling card. You could even do it a couple times up the side of a journaling card. You could back it with like glitter paper or foil paper or something like that too. Definitely lots of options. Now, speaking of backing things, I had a lot of fun backing some of these paperboard pieces. So this is a look at like what they come like. They're just black, they pop out, and they come out really easily from the carrier sheet that they're on, and they're just like a little bit of a light chipboard. So they're nice and sturdy, and you can use them as is, which I have on these layouts in a couple of places. You can see these are from the paperboard as well. But for some of my pieces, I really wanted to back them. So I just used a little bit of glue. I like the Barely Art glue. It has a very fine tip on it. And you just need little dots of glue on the back side of your black piece and then put it onto the pattern paper wherever you want. Whatever pattern you want to use. I used the one that has the rainbow kind of ink blended look. And I tried to pick places where like 2 or 3 colors were blending together. So here I have like some orange, some pink, a little bit of yellow, and then just let that dry on the paper. And once it's dry, you just take your scissors and cut around it. If you find there is a little bit of like white edge on there afterwards, I just took my ink blending tool and just tapped around the edges to cover up any white. And that worked so good. Here I got kind of the pool party color and some of the yellow mixing in. And then remember over on here, I also did that with stamping. So I used that same rainbow piece of paper for my butterflies, for this little label here, this label right here, same thing. I used that rainbow blended paper for this as well. So don't discount your pattern papers. Sometimes they work really good as background for your die cuts or for your labels and file tabs and things like that. I hope you enjoyed seeing all these layouts and getting some ideas. If you want to pick up the guide, you can check out the description box below for all the information, and I will see you again soon with another video.